think it's always hard for an artist or filmmaker to talk about what happened to themselves, like why they went a certain way. But I think one of my big preoccupations with making film was to do with being in the present, being connected without a camera, you know? Like the films are often about that, about seeing more deeply or about understanding associations in greater depth. So about being in the moment more. And of course that's a paradox with a film, because when you watch a film, you're watching something that's out of time. It's a recreation in a black box experience. So you're immediately presented with this paradox of if you're trying to show someone connecting to the world, they're not connecting to the world because they're connecting to a film that's referring to the world. And maybe, I'm just thinking of this now spontaneously as you asked the question, but maybe it has something to do with that, that has created this condition of letting things speak more and more for themselves, that my hand, or the hand of the cinema, of the artifice, has become less over time. The manipulation has become less. And I like to let I say, sometimes I said it in Gambling Gods, that I let the film make itself. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but it's like that. It's letting the forces work on me as opposed to me enforce everything that happens. Yeah, going away from a kind of script writing basis or language, verbal language basis to show things, and more just to experience them with sound and image. You say listening, but I guess it's a combination of senses. And I mean, I think that's always what I was interested in, but I didn't realize that until I made some films. The environment of the industry or the culture often demands that you present things in script form ahead of time. So you're already very influenced when making a film by having to write it down in the first place, and by having to articulate shape and use words. You're using another art form to describe the cinematic form, which doesn't need that. But you can easily get confused in the process and just make your cinema a derivative of the written word. And I think I gradually gravitated away from the written word approach. A big part of it, at least, is the sense of wonder. Is just looking into things that you don't understand, and asking questions, looking behind doors or corners to find something that you don't yet know exists. Like, I love discovering things. And I mean, recently I've been working with some physicists, and it's interesting to see how they're on a similar approach in their own fields. There are many of us are on that approach, where we take one thing, in physics you would call it basic research, where they have one experiment, like they're trying to find this particle that was created at the beginning of the universe, the Big Bang, that they've never seen. But in a way, that's an excuse to find out so many other things. They create this huge experiment to identify that one particle, but they know in the process there's so much more that will reveal itself, possibly dimensions of things that will reveal themselves. And they don't know what it is, and it comes from a sense of wonder and wanting to understand how things go together. And I'm by no means a scientist, but I think the drive behind my filmmaking has a similar quality. I don't know exactly what I'm going to find. And I made the next two narratives when I came out of film school, and was, on one hand looking for, well, how do I make a film out in the real world, And like I said before, it begins with writing a script and raising the money, and the way to do that then seemed to be narrative, you know. So I had all sorts of what I thought were clever structures and you know, double meanings in the top of his head, where it would work as a narrative but also satisfy other layers of filmmaking that I was interested in, and constructed this project. But I think what ultimately a big part of the experience, how a big part of the experience influenced me was that it's working with a crew on a timeline that was very restrictive, because it wasn't a big budget film, you know, yet you had to shoot so and so many scenes every day. You had a crew of 30 people, you know, it worked like a machine. There were unions involved, and it was like an industry. It was like running a factory that was moving around, but you were making cinema. And I think it's fascinating. I think it's a really amazing system of creating film. And it's something I'd like to do again. But at that time and since then, I've been much more interested in not having to deal with a machine like that. You know, in really using the technologies of camera and sound with this most minimal crew possible to interact with the real world. And to observe the real world, and to take the time that's needed to make discoveries in that. So it's a very different way of making films, and it's not that one is, you know, you almost can't compare them because they're so different. And it goes a little bit with what you said about the script writing too, you know, it's like you take out the script, you take out the formula, you take out the industry, you're left with a camera and reality, and you work differently. Yeah. Well, I think film has great potential in being a kind of teacher with its mirroring effect on our own consciousness. Because film is about perception, it's about seeing things, sensing things, experiencing things, it's an incredible tool, both as a filmmaker to use to understand how we see, but also, of course, for an audience to go through an experience, you know, to feel emotion, not only to learn information, but to learn how to see differently, to learn how to see more deeply, to learn how this relates to that, how to think by association. I mean, it has all those characteristics built into it. So if the question is, how can we use film to you know, help our situation in the world, I think, one, it's just on an information level, on a, you know, purely subject-oriented level, but the other is teaching us how to see differently. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, if you look at nature, it's, I think that's again where science and art cross in an interesting way. It's just, it's so complex and surprising again and again how things really affect each other, how things really work. And, you know, our human view has been very either completely mystical or very straight-laced, you know, very boxed and organized. But there's lots of room for seeing how things relate in their oblique ways. Yeah. It's a very insecure way to work too, because you don't, you know, you're sensing things, you're working according to theme. I mean, I think a lot of the things that classical film and film school teach are still very valuable, you know, like how to focus your themes, how to feel narrative. I mean, my narratives mostly come from the way things go, from the way nature works, from the way human interaction takes place, not so much the narrative you know, script teaching that we're taught in film school. My brain doesn't even make sense of that. Like I react strangely to that. But I believe I follow narrative, and I believe, you know, all of nature is narrative. There's narrative wherever you look, you know. But again, I mean, the bottom line is, I think the way I make films is maybe more like a painter paints a painting. Like they just start and the thing grows and it makes sense. All the people in that painter's world, all the stimuli that have gone through this person come out in the painting. And it's similar with the film process, except that you're filming some of those things as you go. And that way is different, again, than the script writing way, where you're sitting at a desk, you're imagining, you're writing it down, and then filmmaking becomes filling in those imagined situations. So again, very different ways of making film, but I don't think one's better than the other. I just think they give different results. And for the last many years, I'm much more fascinated by what I don't know than by what I can control. Good, thanks.